world's changing. And you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.
Let's go to our fifth and final point here for the rundown, which is a weekend preview. So we got a lot going on, BC. Let's see. We've got a UFC show, we've got a Bellator show, and we've got some boxing. Let's start with UFC. Please go first. To you, BC, what is the major storyline heading into the bantamweight clash between former lightweight champion Frankie Edgar and Pedro Munhoz?
I don't know that there's a major one. It's an interesting fight. We want to see how Frankie looks against somebody who's, fairly damn elite, and Pedro Munhoz moving down to bantamweight. It's at a precarious spot in Frankie's career in which, he's old. It's toward the end, yet, in pockets, he's still really good and still good enough. Can he trim this weight like Aldo did and still, have a motor and be at that level? It'd be a big win, by the way, if you beat Frankie, or if you beat Munhoz here. So I'm interested in seeing that. I think it'll be an exciting fight. I don't necessarily think either one, catapults too far because of how loaded this division is in the top 5 at the moment.
Yeah, my sense is the UFC is looking at this to be like, all right, is Frankie a guy we can reasonably put in a title picture with enough wins because he could then raise the profile of these other bantamweight figures who need a little bit of like the old celebrity of the old guard to come down, wash over them. They get the wins eventually, not every time, but eventually anyway, and then everybody moves on. Okay, that could be a thing. Or is Pedro Munhoz one of these guys that's going to join the ranks of the Moises and the Sandhagens and eventually maybe even the Sterlings? We'll have to see. It's principally about that. Which guy is not merely coming or going, but do we have this ability to rely on Frankie to be a top contender that we can put in against other guys? Remember, they had initially booked Edgar against Sandhagen for that North Carolina card, and then they lost it all for Edgar going and taking on the Korean Zombie at up a weight class in a very misbegotten quest to reclaim glory at 145 pounds. So they're trying to see, do we still have any of that left at 135? Pedro Munhoz is a pretty decent test, I think, to start. Bellator
Luke,
245, go ahead.
Well, hold on. If I told you one of these two fighters will somehow get one more title shot before their career is done, are you taking Frankie Edgar or Holly Holm?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
Couldn't you see
I'll go Holly
Amanda?
Holm.
I was going to say, couldn't you see Amanda maybe giving up the bantamweight title because that division is a little bit deeper, defending the featherweight title once a year, being a mom, doing what she wants to do, and then you go, whoever, vacant title at 35. Oh, Holly Holm, here's your 9th title opportunity. Go for it.
Yeah, I could see it for her a little bit more clearly, but time will tell. All right, Bellator 245, Ryan Bader up against Vadim Nemkov there, BC. I got to tell you, I find this to be a very legitimate threat to Ryan Bader. It's a very good contest.
Tell me why. I'm straight up, I'm not that woke to Vadim, so tell me the story here.
Let's see. He got a close fight, but a win over Phil Davis. So this idea that he's going to get wrestle-effed the entire time could be true because Ryan Bader certainly is a bit of a slightly different style wrestler than Phil Davis. Phil Davis a little bit more. He has a good takedowns, but he's also a bit of a mat wrestler. I think someone like Ryan Bader, a little bit more of the ground and pound sort of wrist control variety. So there are some noteworthy differences between them, and he's a bigger person as well than Phil Davis. But he is a Combat Sambo world champion, I think a couple times over, and had a bit of a slow start in certain ways in Bellator, but has really shined of late. I find him to be one of these sort of guys that no one really knows. I remember when he beat Phil Davis, I was looking at the results and I was like, he beat Phil Davis? How's that possible? Well, because he's actually quite talented. He's beaten a lot of other guys in that light heavyweight division as well. So listen, I think Ryan Bader is your deserved favorite. I mean, the guy just went through the heavyweight tournament and barely had a scratch on him. Still, this is probably his toughest fight ever in Bellator. I guess he had the Phil Davis fight in the first fight in Bellator, right? At the one in New York City.
Happened? MSG, that was a rough fight. That was rough.
Yeah, it wasn't that fun, but in terms of like how difficult it was to win, dude, Nemkov is a beast. He can strike his ass off. He is aggressive. He has very good defensive, well-rounded abilities. He is a serious, serious challenge for Ryan Bader.
I love the evolution of Bader's boxing. I love sort of that it took this long, Luke, for him to figure out the confidence and the more well-rounded game to be at his very best. But I do want to ask you this. Where would he be right now in a worldwide ranking at both 205 and heavyweight in your eyes?
You mean like had he not gone to Bellator?
With the evolution of his game that we've seen at Bellator and the wins that he recently added, do you think he's a top 5 heavyweight in the world? And how far down the 205 rankings would you put him?
So you'd have Stipe, Francis, DC, and then who would you have after that?
Well,
Maybe...
DC retired. DC
so you don't
retired,
count DC?
Luke, okay.
So then you can have...
do you think...
he's on the bubble.
Blades?
Yeah, he's on the bubble.
Curtis Blades?
Curtis Blades. Yeah, he's up there. I don't know if he's top 5, but he's on the bubble for sure.
He might be.
At light
top
heavyweight,
3.
though, light heavyweight's where it's interesting because I think if he had stayed in the UFC, he'd have found another way to get a title shot. He just happened to be there at the same time. A, John was, and B, there were still some of those glory year names like the Machitas when Machida was still really, really good. And so he got kind of caught at a bad time. But if he was still there, I think he'd be right. I think you'd be watching Jones Bader too, for sure.
All right, what about Bader Reyes head-to-head right now, 205? Who wins?
That's a tough one.
You could make a case. You could make a case for Darth Bader here.
You could. Bader has certainly benefited by the move to Bellator for a number of ways, but to the point you're making, he has still managed to add layers of complexity to his game to rough up some of the old edges that were there, smooth things out, the boxing and the jab. He's not relying on takedowns. He's got a full array of a kickboxing arsenal, too, when he needs, at least for MMA purposes. He has become quite talented, and so when he needs to wrestle, he can, and when he doesn't, he won't have to. I think Nemkov is interesting because he's going to make us see what are Ryan Bader's offensive priorities, because Nemkov can do it all as well.
Fair enough.
And then last but not least, take us home on this one, BC, for the weekend. Matchroom Boxing has about, at heavyweight, and this is interesting, right? Dillian Whyte taking on Povetkin. Size these two up for the audience, and what does the winner reasonably get here?
This is a big fight. Look, of the 4 Eddie Hearn garden party fight camp fights, whatever he's calling them, this is the most loaded card. It's going to be a pay-per-view in Britain. DAZN just recently officially picked it up for this weekend. So here's what's at stake. Dillian Whyte is your interim WBC heavyweight champion. What that basically means is he's the number 1 contender for Tyson Fury, who's going to get Deontay Wilder a 3rd time coming up. And the winner of this will basically secure themselves a title shot. And look, Povetkin has been to the top before. He's lingered the last couple of years as a dangerous out. Got stopped by Anthony Joshua despite looking good at certain moments. Has had some... Look, he came after Vladimir Klitschko in that loss before getting stopped. This is really his last chance at 40, 41 to get back into that picture or to fade away. He's going to be dangerous, and people have slept on how good Dillian Whyte is. We all remember him pushing AJ in that early fight they had in which he hurt AJ, wobbled him, and then Joshua rallied back to stop him. He's won something like 11 fights since then, Luke, and he's beaten some very credible names, Derek Chisora twice, former champion Robert Parker. So he is in an excellent spot right now to force himself into this, 3-headed triumvirate of Joshua Fury and Deontay Wilder in the moment. And this fight is certainly high stakes because we all want to see Fury, if he beats Deontay, go on to this giant super fight against AJ. But we know both have business at hand, some mandatories coming up. And whoever comes out of this fight, it's going to be a tough out for Tyson Fury. And it's going to be a fun fight to see.
BC, how much blood is in Dillian Whyte's steroid stream?
Oh, how dare you. How dare you. How dare you. This is going to be a good fight, Luke. I hope you watch it. And more importantly, I hope you watch what could be the fight of the weekend, the co-main event. Do you remember on that AJ Andy Ruiz undercard in Madison Square Garden when Katie Taylor, the fighting pride of Ireland, had that absolute brawl, 10 rounds, all action against that Belgian policewoman, whatever, Delphine Pursoon, who squares up, walks straight into oncoming traffic and just throws haymakers the whole time and basically turns a regular boxing match into like a cockfight, if you will. They're going to do it a second time on Saturday. I'm fired the hell up. Luke, I thought that was one of the top 3 fights of the year in boxing last year.
Should be interesting.
Are you in?
This is our time. The world's changing. And you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.